So I had to wipe away the tears. Hopefully the makeup won't run or anything like that. And I want to thank She Leads, She Speaks for one, your existence, for being the powerful women energy, the female energy in District 36. Exemplary. I can say that. I can say that wholeheartedly. I want to talk about, and I was listening as you were talking, Ellen, about the older wisdom that you tend to get. I agree with you 100% because my mentor in life is in her 90s and just a wealth of information, and I hold on to her tightly. You know, they take on the title of mother, okay, just because of motherhood. So thank you, Ellen, for that. And Robin, when you were talking about the fact of supremacy versus, so again, that's what my whole title of this is. There is a mutuality in mentoring. You've all said it. Give, receive. And so I don't do PowerPoints, but what I am going to do is ask you to create a PowerPoint in your mind. In fact, two. So let's go with the first one. The first one is a seesaw. Visualize that seesaw. It's a balance beam, and at the pivot of it is called the pivot or the fulcrum. And that's where one gets to leverage back and forth. So if you have that in your mind, at one end of that, if I'm going to talk about mentoring, is duty. And that mentoring can be nothing but a duty. You get it done. And then at the other end of that is gift. And gift is when we get the opportunity to just give and receive, because that's what gifting is. It is constant and it is continuous. And so the fulcrum is where the power is. That's where the change is. That's where the shift occurs. And that fulcrum is powered by one's desire. The desire of the mentor and the desire of the mentee. So let's take that, and I'm going to start talking to you about my own encounters into mentoring. You know, my first ever initial formal encounter into mentoring occurred when I became a Toastmaster almost 30 years ago, you know, the old days. So in those old days, in that legacy program, I, as a brand new Toastmaster, was assigned a mentor that would help me through my first 3 speeches. Now, I have to admit, that was my entree. I had no formal, and someone said this during the time we were networking, I had no formal mentors when I was growing up. I didn't have mentors who were teachers. I had family members that I could look up to. And I have to admit that the first real mentors that I craved and looked for actually came out of books. I lived in the library and lived looking at and reading autobiographies of famous African Americans. And if you look at the silver hair in those days, it wasn't plentiful. Right? So I had to go and I read them and I read them and I read them. And they became my mentors of thinking, of how they were thinking, what they were thinking, where they were going. And the thing about having a mentor when I got one formally is that I really didn't know what to expect or even what to ask for. Don't forget, those books don't really talk to you. So my first Toastmaster mentor, the relationship was bland. Don't forget that fulcrum, that balance beam. And it lied in the sense of duty. I've got to get you through 3 speeches. So here we go. And with that, I didn't know what to expect, but I also didn't know what to ask for. And think about that. Here I am. I'm a brand new Toastmaster, even though I was older, but I was still a brand new Toastmaster. Didn't know what I could really ask for. And unlike the books, I didn't have a mentor who even asked me, what can I help you with? That's that relationship. It was top down. I'm going to tell you what to do, and this is how you execute. And so it was bland at best. We got through the speeches. Maybe I got to be a little bit better speaker, from the icebreaker to the third project. And that was it. It was over. My second encounter with Toastmasters leadership, mentoring was when I entered into district leadership some time ago. I've been a district official twice. So the first time I did it, it was somebody that was supposed to be with you for the long haul. They were going to stay with you for your whole trek through leadership. And I began to realize one thing, that I didn't think we were going to make it for the long haul. I honestly thought that we weren't going to survive the first year. Why? I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know what to ask for. And what I came to wonder about is I just really, I guess, need some support in my new position, I suppose. And I don't know what that looks like, I guess. And help me, would you? And that was kind of the way that relationship went. And so I received, unfortunately, lip service. A mentor had experienced a real rough patch when she was a district leader. And she was in, I believe, if I had to call it out, PTSD mode, because every time I would call, it was this, or it was so emotionally draining for both of us that I couldn't find any help from her whatsoever. And so my questions didn't lead to anything, and it was not the best. So let me share with you that I went to the other time, and I sounded like I was doomed somewhat, correct? All right, Sandra's got 2 strikes and she's out. But in that first year of district leadership, I had a different perspective. I had a different feeling, and I had an idea of what I needed and who I needed it from. And so I approached a past district leader, somebody that I looked up to and respected, one, because she was incredibly dignified. And I said, well, if anything, I want to be like her. And so I asked her, and she said yes. And I didn't get lip service. She was there. She was there to support, not to give me all the particulars, but really to just listen and guide, question, and be able to put me on the right path. And she became my North Star, particularly in how her character was. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to have that kind of character. When she walked into a room, you knew she was there, and she was only this big. So that's what I wanted to aspire to. Was the fit perfect? Absolutely not. Could we have had a better fit? Sure. But again, life is what it is. And the thing that I knew about her is that she had the desire to be the kind of person and mentor that I needed. And that's when I began to see that mutuality, because the fact that she actually liked me. Remember that Sally Field? She liked me as a person and as a leader and as the potential that I had. And so we grew and we blossomed together. And so as a past district leader, that first go around, I had the responsibility of mentoring upcoming leaders. And those years in district leadership equipped me to be a mentor. They equipped me to be able to ask the question of the mentee. I got it. The training was great. And I had the opportunity to see and to feel and to hear some of the things that I needed to be. If I started talking about one of those relationships, I would be in tears and we would be here for a while. So we may be able to talk about that later, but I can't do it now. But remember that fulcrum that I talked about? That fulcrum at the side of duty and at the side of gift. Well, now I want to focus on what goes into that fulcrum. What desires should a mentor and a mentee be looking for? And to me, it's 5 components. And the base of that fulcrum has to be the biggest. It's like a pyramid. It's got to be the biggest. It's got to be the toughest. It's got to be where you're focused. And that's on growth. It's got to have a growth orientation. That's what's going to work. That's what mentorship is all about. Not only the coaching that goes into it, but the growth that you want to, as a mentor and a mentee, get to another place. And that growth has a mutuality all its own. Every relationship is different. And so the growth for the mentor is to identify where that mentee is, rather than everybody gets the same treatment across the board. That's a growth orientation for a mentor. I learned a lot. The next level up is that it's gotta be that non-ego relationship. Understood from the mentor perspective and the mentee perspective. It's got to be the non-ego relationship. So non-ego relationship for the mentee is, hey, let me just humble myself and drink in what you're going to give me. Mentor non-ego relationship is, you know what? You got something to share as well. So I'm going to take time to get to know you. I want to listen to you first. I want to hear where you are, rather than, as it was already said, well, this is what you got to do. This is where you're going to go. This is how you're going to get there. No, there's no growth in that. So the relationship has got to be based on non-ego. What do you need? I may be able to give it to you. I may not. And if I can't, I'll direct you to somebody that can. Or there is no problem if you already know somebody to go to them for that. That's that non-ego. So that's that next part. First, we start with growth. Then we go to non-ego relationship. The next part of it has got to be the fact that it's got to be open to all possibilities. You already heard it. That relationship has to be open to flipping and going back and forth. As an example, here I was working with the District 36 director, one of the most successful District 36 directors. And she would love to text. And I had to learn the lexicon for texting. SMH, what does that mean? I knew LOL, but SMH. So, I go to the Google, life is good around Google. Went to Google, got the lexicon. Oh, okay, we can roll. Hey, I was open to that possibility of learning. I had to be, in order to make sure that relationship was going to go full steam ahead, and it did. The next is, as we're moving up that ladder, and I think the next three are the things that are really fundamental, that really are capstones. The next is you've got to be open to all possibilities. Every possibility that can happen, you've got to be open to. You don't take things personally. You just don't know. No one day is like the next, but you're open to the possibilities of what they can be, what the potential is for the relationship that you're building. You started with growth. That's that focus. You moved into this and stay with that non-ego relationship. And then you're moving to open to all possibilities. Who would think that the mentor would become the mentee in the years that came? And it's been a desired mentor-mentee relationship ever since, every conversation. Accountability has got to be next. You've got to have accountability within that. When we can make sure that those goals are reached, because there's that desire built into this fulcrum, starting with the growth. We're making sure that it's a non-ego relationship. We're open to all possibilities. There's got to be that accountability that, the things that we said we were going to do, we're really doing them and working that way. And the last, and even though it seems like it's the last, it's the capstone, is complete trust. Trust and respect, respect and trust. They all, to me, mean the same. When we put all of those components in to that fulcrum, when we put that as the pictured by desire, when we do all of that, sorry, I had a timer going. When we do all of that, then we know that this isn't just duty. It really has turned into a gift. And that gift is mutual. It's back and forth. It ebbs and it flows. I've been lucky as a mentor. I have been lucky and blessed and treasured every relationship because of what I've received and what I've grown from. And if you think you can't be a mentor, take these components, begin to enroll them into your own, make it an intention, and then be ready to roll. Because it's not duty when you want to move it to the gift of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My favorite mentee, my favorite Sherpa. I'll say no more.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Is she incredible or what? I think one of the things that has been very telling about our relationship is how it has metamorphed, and we'll talk some more about that. But I'm really excited for this panel discussion. A couple of housekeeping things. If you have questions, put them in the chat. Sandra is going to be here with us the entire day. I'm putting her to work, which is something I did very often when she was my mentor. Yes, you heard me right. When she was the mentor, I put her to work. I want you to put your questions in the chat. And then as we start the actual Q&A portion, and I want to make sure that you're just putting your questions. So don't feel like you're disturbing or distracting us. Put your questions in. You can send them to everybody. You can send them to me privately. You can also send them to Ellen, who she does not know, but as my grand mentee, I'm putting her to work real quick. So please send either to her, to myself, or to everybody, whichever one works for you. All right. Now I am so excited for this panel discussion because it's going to be just that, just us women us sheroes talking to one another. We have three incredible panelists, and we're borrowing Sandra for today because there might be some questions that her sage wisdom may come in handy. Our first panelist for today is Christina Scott. Chris, let me make sure I can see you. So come in camera, show us your face.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fabulous.
Awesome.
I have my phone on deck because I was getting some unstable connection issues, so I'm ready. I'm ready on all.
Excellent, excellent. I love it. Our first panelist for today is Christina Scott. Chris is actually one of my mentees. Christina is one of my oldest mentees, as a matter of fact, in terms of the longevity of the time we've been together. I like to joke about the fact that she was unfortunately my experimental mentee where I learned everything, tested everything on her. But now the beauty of that is we have a shorthand as to how we exist, where we need minimalist communication and we know what's going on. I can look at her, or I can send her one word in the text and she knows where we're at. The second panelist for today, which I'm really excited about, is Lori Bradshaw. Lori is our California Shero. And Lori and I, we've had a very interesting relationship in the sense that Lori joined She Leads, She Speaks. Then she decided to serve as a division director. And in that role, I served as a faux surrogate mentor situation because she hadn't gotten an assigned formal mentor initially. So I'm super excited. On the flip side, Lori is also my mentee's mentee. So she's what I like to call a grand mentee. So it's a whole lot going today, but you will follow us. And I'm super excited for Lori to share just a very unique perspective as a past district leader and as someone who has also served as a mentor to people, but as a mentee as well. Then our third I cannot talk today. Our third panelist is the none and only Kathy Malari. Here's the thing about Kathy. Kathy claims she's an introvert. And for those who know Kathy well, she is, but Kathy is also the life of a party. If you know Kathy well, Kathy will bring so much joy and enthusiasm. When I served as the district director, Danielle and I, who was at the time my number two, we would always crack jokes about the fact that Kathy is the one person who does not have a complaint. She's ready to do work. And she's always there to encourage everybody. And so I'm super excited for just bringing these women with unique perspectives today to share. Now let's get started. My first question, and this is because it came up a number of times in today's conversation and the networking, et cetera. How do you decide that you're either ready to be mentored or that you're ready to be a mentor? And as I said, ladies, before, conversation, so feel free to speak. I'm not going to call names unless I have to.
Dun, dun, dun. So I joined Toastmasters in 2012, so basically a year after Enna. And as Sandra referred to, in the legacy program, there was a point where you are a mentee and then you had to be a mentor. And so when I got to the point where I was a mentor, I was like, okay, well, it's time. I want to finish the leadership, manual. Let me go and see who I can match up with. And some of them were successful and some of them not. But becoming a mentor doesn't mean that you have all the answers, but you have enough experience. So maybe you've served in all of the club meeting roles. Maybe you've given, you're out of level 1 and level 2. So you've given a number of speeches. And just sharing that experience will help somebody else. And then you are, officially or unofficially their mentor.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Anybody else want to share a different perspective or a similar perspective of how I'm ready to be a mentor or I actually need to find a mentor?
So I'll go. I often joke that Enna has voluntold me to do a ton of things. Being a mentor is one of them. I don't think that there was a moment where I thought that I had a chance to make a decision. But no, I'm joking kind of, but one of the things I'll say about Enna, and one of the things that I appreciate most about her mentorship, though not in the moment all the time, is that she sees in me what I don't always see in myself. And for someone who suffers with imposter syndrome and just not feeling ready yet, like I need to do this thing and then I'll feel ready, or I need to do this thing and I'll be ready. You know, if I get these credentials or do this thing, I'll be ready. And sometimes you need someone to say, you're ready. Actually, you're ready. You were ready 3 weeks ago. You were ready 3 months ago. You were ready 3 years ago. And so I'm going to push you out into this water and watch. You'll be able to swim. I promise you. Trust me. Trust me. You got this. And so I will say that about you, Anna. Like, yeah, I was forced or voluntold, shall I say. Oh, okay, well, you're going to be a mentor. I was like, oh, okay. You know, it's just, and because of the relationship that I've had with Anna, I trust that she knows me enough to know, like, okay, she thinks I'm ready. I guess I'm ready, you know? So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Christina. I think one of my superpowers is voluntasking people to do things, and perhaps before or when they're ready. It's a toss-up. Some will say before, some will say when they're ready. Lori, do you want to share with us a little bit about your perspective of how you knew either you were ready to be a mentor or you were ready to be mentored?
Absolutely. I was thinking about something Christina said, and that I think that it's more a matter of, we think of mentors as somebody who has this like wisdom, like they've done all this stuff in Toastmasters or in a career. But in actuality, mentoring, at least for me as a mentor and a mentee, has been more about relationship, more about intuition, like Christina was saying. Anna knew she was ready before she realized she was ready. So a lot of it is about being able to see in others what they don't see in themselves. And I think the most powerful mentors that I have are the ones that have that gift. And you don't have to have all the answers. You just need to be willing to direct them to people who do, or to go there yourself. So it's a different idea of what we usually think of mentors. And what Sandra had said, where you have I've had a mentor that was, he did speech 1, 2, 3, done. That's a completely different kind of relationship than the relationship that I have with my mentor, and hopefully with my mentees as we build our relationships together. Is that I'm not here for my mentees. When you get to a certain point, I'm going to drop you. You know, that's not the way that I came into this. So I think that's the most effective one. Relationship or mentorships are the ones where it becomes more of a friendship and a back and forth.
Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing. And my husband just crashed his Zoom, so my apologies. That's why I was like, why are you here? I have another question for you ladies that I wanted to ask, which I think is very pivotal. So several of you have talked about developing trust and really having that confidence in this person, but how do you develop that trust? How do you meet a person, start this mentoring relationship, and develop that trust? What has been the bedrock of being able to do that, Lori? And I'm going to actually point this question directly to Sandra. And I think she knew it was coming, so.
You know, trust is one of those things that you lend to somebody. So you have to be willing to lend your mentor, mentee that trust. And then hopefully, it'll be reciprocated. That's where that mutuality begins. But it's been built on, as I said, those other things that we've worked through: growth orientation. Tell Wayne hello for me. That we've worked through the non-ego, that we've worked through all of those things that builds that trust. Because trust can be broken in a heartbeat, in a second, then it's hard to rebuild. So that's why it doesn't start off with it. It kind of becomes the capstone because of the other things we've worked through. We've worked through growth. We've worked through the non-ego. We've worked through being open. We've worked through that. And then we see that there's a great deal of trust back and forth. And there's so many components of trust itself that are enormous. All right, it's got to be about that character. It's got to be about that integrity. So it's why that accountability becomes and a part of it, so closely linked to the trust.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing. One of the interesting things about today's session is that we titled it Mentorship Mantras, because there are these little nuggets that we're getting today about mentorship. If I were to ask you, ladies, what is your number one mentorship mantra, the make or break of how you lead your mentorship relationships, what would you say your mentorship mantra would be?
I was actually thinking about that this week because I gave a speech on the mentoring project in another club earlier this week. And I think for me, the one thing that I try to keep in mind is that my mentee is not a mini me. My job is not to put them on my path, to follow my path in Toastmasters. My goal is to figure out, to stand back and guide them as they figure out their own path. So I try to keep me out of the relationship in that way, so that I can truly let them become their authentic self, whatever that might be, instead of trying to make them a carbon copy of who I am. And I think that, I'm not sure if that's a mantra necessarily, but that's my personal philosophy behind being a mentor. Is my goal is not to make you something I want, but to let you become who you already are and to shine.
Thank you so much, Lori. There's something very powerful about what you shared, one of which is reminding us that this relationship is bigger than us. And even a lot of times when we say there's ego in the relationship, unfortunately, most times we're talking about the mentee. So the mentee shouldn't have ego, come to the table being willing to learn. But what you're sharing with us today is the opposite. The mentor should also not come to the table with ego, because there's something in that person and your job is to bring it out, but not to craft them into your own image, as you said. So thank you so much, Lori. Kathy, Chris, Sandra, what are your top mentorship mantras? If we tell you it's got to be one, just one, what is your mentorship mantra?
My mentorship mantra would be, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you need to listen more before you speak, just so that you can get that interaction going, really understand, what your mentee's goals are, because they may want to go slower, may want to go faster. And sometimes, you can help them along, but sometimes you have to let them go depending on what's going on with their lives. But, you also, as a mentor, you're making the commitment to be available to them. So yes, 2 ears, 1 mouth.
I love it. I'm going to save that one somewhere. Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. That is wonderful. Christina, what is your top mentorship mantra? If you had to sum up mentorship in a line for us, what is it?
Relationships over everything. I think that one of the things that I try to do with my mentees is build relationship. And the reason why, I'm about to tell a little bit of the secret sauce, but the reason why, I'm actually listening to a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And one of the things that she talks about is, in order for you to be able to tell someone the truth and like the real truth and be real with them, you have to build a relationship with them first. And so I help my mentees through their Toastmasters path, but a lot of times we're talking about other things as well. And so I want to, if I'm seeing something in you where you are not shining your light as bright as you can, I want to be able to say, nope, like I see it, not today, we're not doing this, and I want to be able to be real, but I can't be real if I'm not first spending that time building relationships. So relationships over everything.
Thank you so much, Christina. A reminder again, if you have questions, please make sure you have them in the chat. Earlier, when we started the session, I made a statement about, is mentoring a woman, so you as a woman mentoring another woman, is that different than you either mentoring a gentleman or the reverse, where a man is mentoring you? Have you found that relationship dynamic to be different? And this is open to any of you ladies. Don't all rush at once.
I'll be happy to answer that one.
Awesome.
And I have found that it differs. It differs in the fact that women think differently and women respond differently than men do. And it takes a while for the relationship, again, if it's built on the parts of the pyramid that have been outlined, to get to that trust, to be able to make sure that both people are mutually coming back, mutually getting something out of that mentoring relationship. So the mentor and the mentee. It's nothing worse than when a mentor is frustrated because of the fact that he can't seem to relate to his mentee. And there's nothing more frustrating than if the woman is the mentee and can't tap through the barrier that that exists with communication with a male mentee. So I've had those experiences on both levels. I find it incredibly different, but it doesn't mean that it's challenging or negative. Has there been growth? Yes. Has there been ego in the relationship? Yes. That's the kinds of differences that I've seen. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And we will come back to you because someone is asking for your mentorship mantra. So I'll give you a chance to think about it a little bit. But the reason why I asked that question is that in preparing for this session, I was watching 2 TED Talks, and then I was also reading a book that was talking about the fact that professionally, now we're pivoting a little bit outside of Toastmasters, but professionally, women are 4 times less likely to have a formal mentor in the workplace. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing that I thought was really interesting too is that most women who don't have mentors professionally, whether it's someone at your job or outside, but someone who's just guarding and watching over your career, they're less likely to ask for a raise, they're less likely to be promoted, and they're less likely to hold managerial leadership positions. And so I share this because on the converse, what was also interesting that I found is that men are more likely to seek mentors. Whether it's short-term mentorship, men are more likely to seek mentors that are men, quite frankly, because there is more of a camaraderie and a push. And on the flip side, men are less likely to pick women as mentees. I share this with us as women because there's something incredibly powerful about women mentoring other women. And so even if you leave the session, you're thinking, do I really want to be a full-time mentor? My encouragement to you is there someone in your life that you can pour into, in Toastmasters or outside, even if it's just for the short term? So these relationships may not be long-lasting relationships. And then a lot of times they don't start that way. I will speak about my own mentor on this very Zoom. This relationship did not start with the intent that we would stick it out for this long. As a matter of fact, there was a crisis when I was a division director, and I needed to talk to someone who I knew had wisdom, but would tell the truth. That's the honest reason why I called her. We talk about this conversation very often. It was about 9:30 at night on a Thursday night. I was at work, stepped into the stairwell, and I called her. And I remember her sitting and saying, I'm going to sit down. But that was how the relationship started. I had a question. I needed someone who could tell me the truth and answer me. And so sometimes it doesn't start off with, I'm just looking for this sensei who is going to guide me. You may just have a question and say, I need someone who can answer me. And so on both sides, I want to encourage us, if you do have questions and there's a woman or someone who you feel has the knowledge, be bold, be audacious, and ask the question. The worst that will happen is they can't answer you or they can't make time for you. That's truly the worst that will happen. And then on the flip side, if you're the person who you house knowledge, be willing to make yourself available to answer the question. You may not be available to mentor someone for years, but can I just answer a question for you? All right, so I have a number of questions in the chat. Some were sent privately, some were sent overtly. I'm going to have us ask a couple of them. So the first one I have is from Amaris. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. How do you go about asking someone to be your mentor? So say the day has come and you feel that you want to make the ask. How do you go about it? And ladies, feel free to answer the question, how did you go about it, or have you been asked in the past?
So for me, when I decided that I needed mentors was really when I got stuck in my career and just was not sure what to do next. And there was a great opportunity by, I think it was called Healthcare Businesswomen Association. And they had group mentoring groups that stayed together for like 5 or 6 months. There would be, up to 6 mentees and 2 mentors. Unfortunately, I think we were supposed to have a third one who was male, but it's like our mentors were female. And just, thinking that, okay, I need some help to figure out what I want to do next. And then looking around to see what opportunities are available, who has the knowledge that could help me with that. And I could see approaching someone that maybe you've exchanged pleasantries with before. You think maybe you want to take that chance, because then, as you said, the worst they can say is no. But you just maybe ask for a 15-minute meeting and say whatever it is that you're looking for help with, and see if the relationship starts. But it's about taking that step and being brave, because nothing bad's going to happen. The worst thing that can happen is that I can't help you, but maybe they can give you someone else who can.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Anybody else want to share? How do you make that ask? So I need a mentor. I want a mentor. How do I go about asking the person?
When I ask, I haven't ever actually said, will you be my mentor? That's maybe not my style. I don't know, but I too was at a place where I wasn't stuck in my career. I was overwhelmed. I was put into a new arena where I had never been before, and I had no idea where to go or what to do or how to do it or why or anything. So that was beginning, was asking questions, and it kind of developed into a mentoring kind of relationship in that way. And I like, who said it? Robin in the chat has mentioned how mentoring women is more like a parent-child a lot of time, where women mentoring women is more of a relationship of equals. And that really resonated with me, because when I think about it, the mentors that I turned to at that moment were men, because the industry I was in was male dominated and the company I was in was male dominated. So I turned to the men to understand how they got where they are. But then I also needed female mentors, because we can't do what they do. Quite honestly, I mean, we know that we can't do the things that men do and make the progress that men make. It just doesn't work. So I had have that mentor that was a man who had gone through the process, or a couple of male mentors actually, but I also needed female mentors that helped me figure out how to work the process as a woman, so that I could reach the goals that the men had reached through a different process.
Thank you so much, Lori. And that's the perfect pivot to the next question, which was, is it appropriate or okay to have more than one mentor? And how do you balance having several mentors? And I see a number of head nods amongst the panelists. So it seems like either you know how to juggle your many mentors, or you have some insight. Thoughts, ladies?
I honestly, if I can answer that question, I had a couple, particularly when I was coming up in district leadership. This person had a skill that I really wanted to encapsulate. So I asked them to mentor me on that. Someone else had another skill that worked very well. I had another district leader counterpart, who was an incredible listener, would let me vent. And as he said, I've been married 3 times. I know how to do this. So again, he was an incredible mentor, because he would let me get it out and then help me process. So again, it's a matter of what. Remember, I said, at first I didn't know what I needed or how to ask. Then I finally learned how to ask, because I could identify what I needed.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing. I think, Christina, you seem like you're itching to share.
I mean, I'm not itching, but I'll share. I think that there's formal mentorship and then there's informal mentorship. And so a lot of times you may have a formal mentor here, but then someone who can you can informally learn from in a different space. And I just remember something that I heard Oprah say. Now, she was talking about coaches, but I think there are some similarities in mentorship and coaching. And she said, why would I just have one coach? I have 5, right? Because, and it's like, okay, well, Oprah, who's very successful in her life, depends on the pouring in and the feedback from other people and a series of other people, then yeah, we should as well. I think Oprah is a great person to look at as an example.
Thank you so much, Christina. There are 2 things that you brought up that tie to 2 questions that are in the chat. And so I'm going to just read out the question. So the first question was about peer mentoring and how do you find peers that can co-mentor with you? That's how the question is phrased. I hope we're able to capture exactly what you need, the person who asked this question. But if you want to clarify some more, feel free to do so. So the question was, again, about peer mentoring, and she is asking, how do you find someone that can be a peer mentor to you, essentially?
So I think my first official Toastmasters mentor, where I had to get through the first 3 speeches, we were really more friends. I mean, she was the one who had introduced me to the club, and she needed someone so that she could get that mentoring credit. But I felt like, because I felt like we were friends, you know, over coffee, we would discuss what's the best way to put together a speech, and, you know, how should I think about topics, and just kind of how should I structure. And because it was kind of like a going back and forth, that I didn't feel like, oh, she's the mentor and I'm the mentee, but it was more of a peer relationship. You know, to be honest, I can't remember if there was anything that I helped her with, but I know that I didn't feel like I couldn't approach her. So I did feel like there was back and forth, maybe a little bit of the seesaw, especially the further you go along in Toastmasters, we're helping each other, where it's like, okay, you know, you learn how to do some of the club roles. And then once you learn enough of that, feel comfortable with that, then you're reaching down to the newer members and showing them, this is how you do it. Here are some tips to help share. Maybe that speaks to it.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I believe it does. And one other challenge I would like to pose to the mentors is peer mentoring can also happen with people who are mentors that mentor other people. So said another way, in our club, Lisa and I have kind of the largest bulk of mentees. And we joke about it a lot, but it's a lot that we both have. But one of the things we've been able to do is swap best practices with each other. So how are you juggling, you know, your 10 or your 11 essentially, and how are you making it work? And it's been helpful to us. We've learned about how we can meet with our mentees as groups. We've learned about using group chat opportunities. We've learned about pairing some individuals within our team with other people who are less experienced. So just being able to share best practices with another mentor has been the way that I've seen peer mentoring manifest for myself. Lori, do you want to share a little bit about how you've leveraged peer mentoring or how it could be leveraged?
Sure. I think there's a lot of things. And I like the idea that the wisdom or the knowledge or whatever it is that you're sharing with your mentor and your mentee, it kind of flows through. So I know that a lot of the things that I've learned from my mentor are things that I now pass on to my mentees. And I think we joke a lot about being, I'm Anna's grand mentee, and then my mentees are her great grand mentees. You know, we joke about all this, but it's really true. And I think that's part of the strength of our mentoring group here in She Speaks, is that there's not a lot of these 3 speeches and done kind of mentoring, but people that are in this, both the mentors and the mentees, we all have commitments to growing together and learning together. And so it becomes very mutual. And I think, especially, I've noticed my relationship with my mentor moved to be more of a unilateral. And I really like that. There's sometimes when she needs to talk and I need to listen, and vice versa. And I think we have a really good balance. And so that's been a great lesson for me as I begin mentoring as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lori. We have a ton of questions. I'm hoping we can get through all. We shall see. Any ones we can't, we will do our best to answer them offline. So there is a question here, and this is from Natalie. Natalie was bold to share her question openly. As you grow as a mentor, what specific areas are you working on that you feel would elevate your mentorship? So as you grow as a mentor, what specific areas are you working on that you feel would elevate your mentorship? And I just love the way, as soon as the question came, all of our panelists looked up to the sky. I guess the answer is coming from the rooftop. Anybody want to answer that question? That is too funny.
I don't mind taking that one on.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Natalie, for the question. I think that as a mentor, and I've done this for so long, I find my own growth in it. And I make sure that I assess myself in that relationship. If it's ongoing, if it has ended, where was I? I have to take a look at it. It's that self-assessment. And then also, what did I glean from the mentee? Was I able to read the face? So was I able to listen? I had my mentor, Sherpa, actually give me some of the best advice I've ever received in that past year as district leader. Just incredible. And, you look at us and you go, well, how can you listen to her? Are you kidding? Are you kidding? It was the best advice. In fact, I said that to her. I said, that was the best advice you ever could have given me. And it is one of those things that I integrated. So again, it's a matter of looking at your own growth, assessing your own self, making sure that you've been able to apply your authentic self. Okay, because Anna and I are completely different. I think she's a far better mentor than myself, but we're different. And so our skill sets, our ways of being a mentor are going to differ. And it'll appeal to who? Make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing. Any of the other ladies want to share? You seem to have gleaned something from the sky when you looked up. I think Christina unmuted herself. So Christina and then Kathy.
Yeah, I think just building from what Sandra said, it's like, was I helpful? Was I able in that moment to be able to connect with the person that's in front of me? Was I able to decipher what they needed most in that moment? Kind of similar to what Lori said, that wasn't about me and more about what they needed. Was I able to push them? And so for me, it's working on listening and making sure that I'm hearing what's being said, both verbally and then also what's being said in front of me, which is why I meet with my mentees on Zoom so I can see them. And also just making sure, because I said relationships over everything, one of the ways that people feel comfortable in being their truest selves is when you are as well. So am I vulnerable? Am I listening so that people can feel like that it's a safe place to connect with me? So that's what I'm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christina. One of the things you said that I think is really powerful is coming to the table as a mentor with vulnerability and being able to say, I too am growing, I too am learning, and where are my opportunities for learning? And so this is, as we add to the mentorship mantras, one we should add for the mentors is getting evaluation from your mentees, asking them, am I serving you? Am I meeting your needs? And this transfers me to a very interesting question, which is, what do you do when the pairing goes awry? Either it's not a good fit, so I'm merging two questions together, which is if it's not a good fit, or if you want to truncate the relationship. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, for me, Anna, I mean, I guess sometimes the relationship ends because you feel like the mentee has outgrown you. They have excelled. They have done fabulous things within the club, I mean, it's like I've got a couple of mentees who are a great example of that. But I always let them know, if you need me, if there's a question you want to ask me, if you want to tell me you need to serve in the grammarian role next week, call me. If I'm available, I'm happy to help. But also, as I had mentioned previously, sometimes a mentee will think, okay, I have this goal to succeed in Toastmasters, but then their life gets in the way. They change jobs, or it's not really what they thought it would be, and it just doesn't work. As a mentor, it's like I'll continue to reach out to them until they tell me, okay, Kathy, you're nice, but stop. and that's okay, because it's like sometimes there's not a good fit, or sometimes they need to focus on something else. It can't be Toastmasters right now. And that's okay.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I like the fact that you are sharing about because a lot of times when we think of mentorship, we like to share the good stories, and the good stories are good. But there's also the reality that sometimes the pairing is not right, or the relationship has to end. So I really appreciate you sharing that. It's not a failure on your part as a mentor, or a failure on your part as a mentee for that matter, if the match is not right. It's a question of, what do we learn from this, and how do we move forward? I'm going to press that question just a little bit, which is, say I'm a newish mentor, and the relationship it's just not working. I'm giving my recommendations. The mentee is kind of like, nah, I hear you, but I'm going to do something completely different. How do you handle that kind of situation? Do you tough it out, or do you decide to pivot and consider either different tactics, or do you unfortunately drop the mentee? I love the way everybody's face is like, oh, and this one, I'm actually going to have Lori and Sandra answer, just because both of their eyes peaked when the question was asked. I feel like they have a story to share. And Carolyn, I got your question, so I will make sure that I ask about the time frame.
I think what came to mind was, that's a time of reflection. Like Kathy was talking about how things don't click, or it's the wrong timing, or something happens in their lives, or it's not what they thought it would be. So I think for me, it's a matter of being as honest with myself as I can be. Is there something that I could have done? Is there something, I don't like to use should, because there's not specific rules on what a mentor is. So there's nothing you should do. It's actually, as a mentor, for me, it's every relationship is unique. So there is nothing the same between how I relate to each of the people, on either as my mentor or as my mentees. But it's more just a matter of personal honesty. And then the other thing is getting your ego out of the way. And that was a hard one at first, because I had, in one of my clubs here, I had a mentee that went through the first speech, and I had another mentee that went through the first 3 speeches, and they're both gone. And I'm like, oh, what did I do? It's hard not to take it personally at first, but the honest truth is they had young children and COVID happened. And so that time frame at 7:15 in the morning, when that club met, with children at home that don't get shipped off to school somehow or something, it changed the dynamic and their availability. So I think that for me, the most important thing is not to have my ego in there. So then when it doesn't work, or when the mentee disappears, or whatever happens, it's not a personal failure, and it doesn't derail me, and it doesn't stop me from trying in the next time.
Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing. One thing I really appreciate about you sharing is that, again, it's not a failure, but there has to be that accountability, though, as a mentor, to reflect and think, could I have done something better? And where are the opportunities for improvement on my end? Sandra, I saw your eyebrows go up when I asked the question, so I feel like you have stories to share.
Oh, I have stories to share. Yeah, but I have also, it's that mutuality, and that was my mantra. So I'm going to throw in that response to that question: mutuality and mentorship. And so when I'm starting, particularly with a mentor that I don't know, that's walked to me and said, I want to, questions start as we're meeting. What do you need from me? And when I hear, I need you to be able to give me great advice. And I say, great. And, and what will you do and how will you do with it? Well, because I tend to do these things and I have this behavior and I don't want to have that. So we meet, the advice is given, the behavior continues. You see the discrepancy, and you give and seek the advice and the behaviors. And then it started with, I should have listened to you. And then that's when I began to see that's the accountability. Because of the fact it was stated, this is what I need. This is what I need to, because I have this behavior, but I'm not willing to change. And so there's a conversation, in fact, several conversations. And then we have to begin to look at the process of ending the relationship. Because of the fact the mutuality is gone, even the fact of the accountability. Don't forget how high that is on my pyramid. It's next to trust, and that's not there. If it's not intrinsic, then we're seeing the same behaviors over again. And what you sought me for is not being affected. I think we may need to look at a different kind of relationship or with someone else. And so I'm pretty honest about being able to say that nicely.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I think this is probably one of the more serious lessons that I had to learn from you, knowing when to say no to mentor people, which is not an easy thing, because when you serve in certain roles or people have admiration, if you're not careful, you will find yourself saying yes when you really have no business saying yes. And you also have to realize that sometimes there's a better person out there for them than you. They might not see it at first, but that's just the truth. And a perfect example is one of Christina's mentees. When the person initially joined the club, they asked for me, and I saw what they wanted, and I thought, I can't give you this. I'll tell you who can though, Christina. And probably the best decision that I made, being accountable about what I could give this person or the lack thereof. But it also gave the opportunity for this person to have the thriving relationship that she has. So I also want to encourage everybody, just because someone asks is not a reason. When I said earlier that you should be available within reason, and be honest with yourself about what that availability looks like as well. And don't let your ego get in the way. If people are like, oh, I like you, well, that's not a reason to say yes to be someone's mentor either. And there are two questions that I do want to get to. The first is actually three questions. So the first was by Nisha, asking about the time frame. So how do we determine the time frame of mentorship? And I know some of it was answered earlier in terms of some of it is formalized time frames that Toastmasters gives us. But I think the question she's asking is, in general, how do you determine the time frame of how long you stay with your mentees? Christina, I think you were saying something.
That's a good question. I think,
well, I'll let you think.
Sometimes it's agreed upon upfront. Will you mentor me so that I can get this job, this promotion, right? So it's like an agreed upon time period. Sometimes it's like, well, will you mentor me because I really value your values and I want to learn from you, and that's not always as clear. So I think that the answer to that question varies. I think that constant communication about between mentor and mentee about whether needs are being met or whether support is still needed is helpful to know, okay, well, we're great friends. We don't necessarily need to be in a mentee-mentor relationship anymore. Or, sometimes the mentee has now become the mentor and I might need your support in something that I'm working towards. So I think it all varies, but formally in Toastmasters, I think, what is it, the first 3 speeches or, yeah.
Thank you so much, Christina. I do want to add something really quickly, just in terms of the time frame. I would encourage the mentors, even within this group, we do have the formal mentor program where we assign someone to you, but I would encourage everybody to do a pulse check probably every 3 to 6 months just to see how that relationship is going, and on your end, but also on the end of the mentee. More questions. So we have a question that speaks to, what if you're reaching out to mentor, but they're not being responsive? When do you determine that it's time to truncate that relationship? How do you go about that process? So we're speaking about non-responsiveness from the perspective of the mentee. You're reaching out to your mentor and you're getting nothing from the mentor.
I feel like if you're not getting anything, maybe you talk to the VPE, especially if the VPE is not your mentor. And if not, then you go to the president. But and I think you should just say just that. It's like, it doesn't seem like we're aligned. Would it be okay if we switch? Because it seems that my mentor and I just don't have enough schedule overlap so that we can make time for each other, or so that she can make time for me. And I think that's okay. I mean, it's like, some people, for me, I'm a project manager, so it's like I like things set in certain times. Other people are much more free flowing, and that probably doesn't work all that well for me. But for somebody else, if they're also free flowing, then great. Maybe that match would be a better match for the mentee. And that's okay.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. I appreciate your honesty on that, which is just reach out to someone and say, it's not working. It's really just that simple. There's no reason for us to suffer through the pains, especially within the confines of Toastmasters and this club. There's a ubiquity of people who are available to help you. So there's no need to tough it out if your mentor is nowhere to be found. There's a question that was asked about
really quickly.
Absolutely.
To that last question of, if you're reaching out to your mentor and you're not hearing back from them, from the other side of things, I also think as a mentor, it's really important to be honest with yourself about your capacity, what you can take on, because a lot of times the reason why you're not hearing back from someone is they don't have the capacity to be a mentor. And so that needs to be explored as well.
Thank you so much, Christina. Perfect segue, because the next question was, how do you determine, or when do you determine that you need a break as a mentor? Basically, how do you take breaks from mentoring? And ladies, have you ever taken breaks from mentoring? Have you taken pauses? Let us think about that. I will share that I did take a formal break. I had a major life event, and I'm like, deuces to all my mentees. When I come back, if you still want to continue with me, we will do that. But alas, life duties have arisen. And I have to be very honest and have that very candid conversation with them to tell them I cannot, not at this time, not with what's going on in my life. So.
Well, I mean, Anna, I think that's totally fair. Sometimes life happens. As you know, life really happened for me last quarter, and I did really need to take a break. And I had been offered a few different opportunities of things to do, things to shine within our club, and I had to pass on them because mentally I wasn't there. But when that sort of thing happens, you need to be open with the people that you have relationships with, including your mentees. If they're relying on me and they need more than I can give them, it doesn't serve me to ignore them. I mean, they need to know, I'm sorry, right now I'm not available to you. Maybe Lisa can help. Maybe somebody else in the club who's very experienced can help. And then just explain.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. I really appreciate that. There is a question that is essentially a segue to what you were sharing about, which is, what are your areas of vulnerabilities, not weaknesses, but areas where you want to do better? So I'll ask the question again. What are your areas of vulnerabilities, not weaknesses, but areas where you want to do better? So I guess this question is for our panelists. Someone is wanting to know, what are the areas where you want to do better as a mentor or a mentee?
I need to do the right thing about getting the feedback, as you mentioned, Anna. You know, it's like I've had some successful mentees in this club, and the ones that are still hanging in there, I do need to go back and ask them, what did I do well? What could I do better in the future? Just because I have in my mind certain things that I want to do, but I know that there are other mentors, and it would be great to hear some of those best practices. And then that's on me to reach out to others that are serving as mentors to find out, are there other things I could be doing that would really help out my mentees?
Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. I appreciate it. Anybody else want to be vulnerable and share their vulnerabilities as a mentor or mentee? Sandra. Oh, I just like the formality of it.
Oh, I raised my hand. I think one of the and I learned this over the past year with my Sherpa, is take that pause. I want to go and get things done. I'm that kind of person. And pause, breathe, then take and ask the question. And that, I think, was a vulnerable spot for me. She's shaking her head because she knows exactly the date. And I learned from that. And that has just been such a gift for me as a person, because I thought I was okay. I'm pretty direct, I get things done. But it was the relationship that she was sharing with me. You need to take that pause.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And yes, I do remember the day and the time. And we are all grateful that you took the pause. Lori, do you want to share a vulnerability? While you're thinking, I'm going to share one of mine. I think the biggest vulnerability for me as a mentor is twofold. So it's a catch-22 sometimes when you see gifts in people, but it's learning when you should say something and when you should be quiet. I find myself that in the earlier portion of learning how to be a mentor, I had a tendency to just share what I thought was inside of the person so early that I think for some people overwhelmed them. And so I had to learn, and I have learned over the years to essentially bite my tongue. Even if I see that you can do something, if you're not ready, I need to give you the space to be ready. And not all my mentees like that, because they'll say, I feel like you know something I don't know. And I'm comfortable at this point in my life saying, yes, I do, but I'm still not going to tell you. And you're going to wait till you discover what you need to discover. And I know most of them are just like, why? Just tell me. But that's not my job. My job is to let you figure it out. Natalie, stop rolling your eyes. Lori, please share with us a vulnerability of yours.
Sure, I relate to what you're saying. I think one of the things for me is recognizing that I've got this, like, here's this path in front of me. Oh, let's do this and this and this and this. I've got everything here, very goal oriented. And so for me, one of my vulnerabilities is to recognize that not everybody's like that. And actually, if I don't temper that tendency in myself, I can scare people off rather than helping them, like you're talking about, pushing them too soon. I think there's a lot of value in letting them figure it out on their own. And so it's a delicate balance. You want to make sure you're giving them enough of a push when they need it, but you also need to recognize that there's time when you need to back off and just let them figure it out on their own. And so that's one of the balances that I'm trying to find, and I'm continually looking for.
Thank you so much, Lori. And it goes back to that analogy Sandra's making about the seesaw, making sure that you have that balance. So I appreciate it. I know there are a couple of questions, but unfortunately our time is so well spent and it's time for us to pivot to the next part of the meeting. But I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of things that we shared today. And there's a question that I have for all the panelists, which will close us out. And the question is, what is the best advice you've ever gotten from a mentor, or what is the best advice you've ever given? Who knows? It goes both ways. So what's the best advice you've either given or gotten from someone?
I think for me, it was to take the Strength Finders quiz and find out things that I was strong in and pursue those as opposed to necessarily focusing on the things that I didn't do so well. Just because maybe it's even easier. It's like, I know that I like learning, and so let me go learn about something else. And that was such an eye opener. I mean, it's like, it ended up in me getting downsized from one job, but then I found another job where I got paid better. I liked the people I worked with better, and they gave me the opportunity to be in the new position that I'm in. And it's in a different department. So it's like more growing and just so exciting. And, just learning more about yourself and really understanding from there, understanding what you could do next.
I appreciate Kathy. If I were to summarize what you said, basically it's about self-discovery. And as Natalie said, know thyself. What it's about self-discovery and figuring out what am I good at. And I think a lot of us, particularly as women, we have a tendency to be afraid to admit what we're good at. I don't know why, because a man who is barely good at something will tell you. But women, we feel that if we're not at expert, and it's the truth, we feel like if we're not at expert level, we don't come out and say, I'm good at that. And most of us, we are afraid, quite frankly, to admit what we're good at. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you so much. Christina, give it to us. Best advice you've received or given as a mentor or mentee.
So I've received a lot of good advice from you, Anna, or other mentors that I've had in the past. And it's so funny because I'm looking at a theme of advice that Anna has given people, and it's sit down. The most recent best advice that I can think of that Anna, my mentor, shared with me is like, sit down, stop, you're doing too much. I was in a situation, I'll just be honest, I was in a situation where I had COVID and I was in a different country, stuck. And I decided that instead of resting and taking all of the hits that were coming at me and the realization like you're stuck in a place and what does this really mean? I decided to open up my laptop and work. And the way that Anna took her hand and grabbed it through the screen and told me to sit down, it was palpable. Sometimes we need, again, that's why I say relationship building over everything, because Anna knew me. She knew like, you're doing too much, you're overwhelmed, you're overexhausted. And I was looking in the chat, Alethea said, rest, my dear. Sandra, I heard you mention that Anna told you to rest as well. So I feel like this is a value of yours, Anna.
Thank you so much, Christina. For better or for worse, I gravitate towards people who are like me, who do a lot and they're very high energy, high functioning. And so the lesson of resting is one of the ones I had to learn as a leader, which is why I tell everybody, you got to take time to rest. And Christina was truly doing too much. This woman had COVID, was still working, and I just had to call, it's not typical for me to call. I usually text. So as soon as I was calling, she knew she was in trouble. And she's like, I'm dropping the laptop. I'm done. I'm packing it up. I'm going to go sleep. I'm done for the day. So thank you so much for sharing. Lori, share with us best advice you've gotten or given as a mentor or mentee.
Sure. When you said that, though, the first thing I thought was, but when you called her, did you use her middle name? Because then you're really in trouble, Christina, when she uses your middle name. I think one of the things that's the most memorable for me was when I was given the idea that just because you're afraid or it brings anxiety doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Being brave doesn't mean doing it anyway, even though you feel afraid. And that's one of the most important things I learned at first, and what I try to pass on to my mentees as well, is even now, even before this meeting, I had nerves. I mean, before a speech, I'm nervous. I think most of us, if we admit it, will admit we are still nervous, even though we've got the DTM behind our names, right? And we've been doing this for lifetimes. But it's not that you get rid of that feeling of being afraid. It's that you learn how to perform well despite that feeling inside of you. And that was one of the really important lessons that I learned, not just as Toastmaster, but as a person, as a human being, and as a leader, is that it just because you have that feeling of anxiety and fear doesn't mean that you can't do well or excel even in what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Lori. What you remind me of is the idea of having safe spaces, but moving from safe to brave spaces. And that's one of Natalie's lifted directly from my mentee. So giving credit where it's due. Thank you so much, Lori. And Sandra, I'm gonna let you give us your sage advice that
oh my gosh,
the best advice you've gotten. As
you were just too kind. So here we go. There's so many things. And so there's the best advice that I think I've been able to incorporate into me that I've gotten through all of these relationships as a mentor and mentee is that there's a sacredness in this. There's a sacredness in mentoring. There's a sacredness in listening. There's a sacredness in the pause. All of it is sacred, which means that it's a blessing. That's why at one end there's a duty, and at the other end that there's a gift. And that gift is where I want the fulcrum to push and to end for every encounter. And so that's the best bit of advice. You're part of it, other people are part of it. It's all, mentees are part of it. That this is a sacredness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm going to wrap up by telling our panelists, ladies, you are awesome. You already know this. Everybody, I'm getting a lot of comments in the chat privately, people saying they feel like their questions were answered. So I really appreciate you ladies for sharing and really just giving us an opportunity to showcase what mentorship looks like from different perspectives. For those who are thinking about being mentors, I hope this session inspired you to let you know that you don't have to have all the answers. For those who are on the other end and you're thinking, do I want to be a mentee? I want to encourage you, as Christina said, if Oprah, the whole Oprah, can decide that she is now too grown, too successful to insert any adjective you want to receive mentorship advice, none of us are at a point where we cannot learn. And so on both sides, make sure that you know that you can and should seek to always be a mentee, which is why I'm keeping my mentor for life. Like, she can never retire. We're in this thing forever at this point. But on the flip side, also recognizing that it's okay to pour into people, and as much as you can, when you can, within the capacity that you can. So thank you so much.